Stephen Reid from Michell Wool, as usual, great to have you with us here on Flow.
Thank you, Ricky.
How have the markets performed this week? We've had a bit of a better week on the prices.
Absolutely. Right from the outset, you could see more confidence for buyers, particularly on merino wools, a little bit less on crossbreds, but cardings were up as well. But overall, the indicator went up 16 cents. There was just shy of 36,000 bales put up and only 9.3% passed in. So a pretty solid week all in all.
And I think over recent months, hasn't there been a general downward trend with the indicator, but is it starting to turn up? Is this a positive sign things might be heading north again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what's behind, and it's some interesting stuff to see behind the scenes this week, is the entry of other markets outside of China, who's the dominant buyer. They have some pretty good sales into Mexico. One of the American mills was in buying. The Italians are back, and not with complete abandon, but they're back following the market. India's getting more interested. Korea's getting more interested. So if you look at the overall trade sales this week, it's far more balanced than we've seen in former times.
And we've talked previously about how this is because the weather's getting colder there and people are starting to think about rugging up. Why is it sort of that close to when the weather's turning? Was there not any forward projection or planning about this sort of thing?
Well, most people have been operating in a just-in-time situation for years now, and Northern Hemisphere is the biggest consumer of wool at a retail level, and they missed last year with COVID. Everybody was locked up, so there is a bit of catch-up buying from consumers going on. Discretionary spending's kicked up, and you can see it in cosmetics. You can see it in all sorts of things in the Northern Hemisphere, and wool. Top-end consumer products will be in the same category. But I think the other thing that's going on is they're suddenly realising you can't buy just in time.
Yeah, and that's a real critical point there. If we look at it, logistics and how challenging that's become, that's what strikes me as a bit odd, is there's a sudden rush on buying when maybe logistics are going to be a little bit problematic for a while going forward.
Well, it is, and certainly freight rates, I think we've touched on it once or twice before, but freight rates around the world have gone bananas, to use that technical term. Just to give you a reference point, to take a container of wool or wool top or even wool grease out of China into Europe used to cost $1,200 for a container. Current quote is $25,000. And don't assume it'll be leaving next week. It could be 6 or 8 week delays. Getting shipments out of New Zealand in particular to Europe is almost impossible. Getting shipments out of Australia, you've got 6 week delays. So I think, whilst at a simple level you'd say, well, don't buy wool because you can't ship it. Conversely, these mills have got to run. You better get your wool and get yourself allocated on a vessel. People are getting in early.
And speaking of Europe, we've talked in the past on the show about this passion or hunger for non-mulesed wool. Is that sort of picking up again as the Europeans come back on stream on the general front?
Absolutely. Certainly the premium in the market for non-mulesed wool was very evident this week, and it's a lot of the superfine wool in particular. Crossbreds are all non-mulesed anyway, but that gap's opening up, so there is premiums there. And from a grower's perspective, there needs to be premiums. The cost of running sheep in many areas is significantly higher to have non-mulesed. Some areas can't do it, some bloodlines can't do it, but those that can incur better costs or higher costs. And it's good to see the markets actually rewarding the growers for that.
Yeah, I guess as much as we can be frustrated in some senses that what we grow and what we do is driven by buyer desire, that's really where it sits, is the consumers, we've got to meet their demands.
Well, it's a fine balance. It all starts with demand in a consumer. There's no point making something if somebody doesn't want it. On the other hand, you've got to be understanding of how do you raise animals in a safe way to protect their welfare. So there's a fine balance between the two, but it is good to see premiums in that area to cover the additional costs that some growers are facing. And
just finally, looking at next week, how many bales are up for auction? We usually lose a few, but are we looking at a big week next week?
Yeah, no, bigger week. 41,600 rostered. You're dead right over the weekend, and it's always a mystery, but we lose a couple of grand. So I'm suspecting we'll see about 37 or 38 put up to the trade. Currency's pretty good. General optimism's out there. We should see another solid market, Ricky.
Well, Stephen, from Michell Wool, it's great to catch up with you, and I think that we'll be tracking a hopefully very positive continuing market trend next week.
Hope you're right. Have a great weekend.